Okay, so this is the last of the three things that you need for a closed circulatory system. So we need a mechanism for making the medium or blood go through to all the tissues. And in us, we have a heart. So we're going to talk about some of the features of our heart. And most of this is actually on a handout. You have a heart to label on one side, and on the back side it has descriptions about the heart and blood flow through the heart. Okay, so our heart is roughly the size of your fist. So some of our fists are bigger than others, so your heart would be a slight bit bigger. It's surrounded and protected by a pericardium. Para means around, and cardium refers to the heart. So that is a tissue membrane that kind of surrounds and protects it, and it's filled with fluid. We have a four-chambered heart, like we learned when we talked about vertebrates, the different classes. We have 2 atria and 2 ventricles in our heart, and our heart acts like 2 pumps. Okay, the left and the right side are completely separated by a wall of tissue called a septum, and that allows us to separate the oxygen-rich or oxygenated blood from the oxygen-poor or deoxygenated blood. So there's not the mixing that we saw when we talked about the lower vertebrates, like fish and amphibians and even reptiles. Okay. We have valves within our heart that prevents backflow during contractions. And so the online heart lab that you were working on was designed to kind of help you learn about the heart, how the blood flows through the heart, and how the heart beats. Okay, so we will go through this in class anyway and label the diagram together. Okay, but I'll show you one that's labeled already, and I'll help you kind of follow through the path of how your blood flows. And you can look at the back of the diagram too if you want. So basically, blood that's coming from your tissues comes in through the right side of the heart. I wonder if I can get a pen. Might be a little easier. Yeah. Okay, so deoxygenated blood from the anterior region of your body, or the upper region, comes in through the superior vena cava into the right atrium. From the lower part of your body, it comes in through the inferior vena cava or posterior vena cava into the right atrium. So this is the right atrium right here. Okay, then it's going to pass from the right atrium down into the right ventricle. And the ventricles are the more muscular parts of the heart. Okay, so when the heart beats, then it's going to force blood out of the ventricles. Okay, it forces it out of both ventricles at the same time, but it's easier to understand blood flow by kind of following a little bit of blood as it's coming back into the heart, into the right atrium, and kind of follow that bit of blood as it would pass through the heart. Okay, so it passes into the right ventricle. From the right ventricle, it would pass up through this big vessel, okay, into the pulmonary arteries. Okay, so goes out to the lungs, and what happens in the lungs? Pulmonary refers to lungs. So the pulmonary arteries are carrying deoxygenated blood out to the lungs. In the lungs, the blood is going to, like the red blood cells, are going to pick up oxygen. So the blood that comes back from the lungs, it's going to be, we'll change it to red. Okay, because it's now got lots of oxygen. Okay, so the pulmonary veins carry oxygenated blood. Okay, these are kind of running behind the other vessels, so you just kind of can't see that they're coming into here. Pulmonary veins carry oxygenated blood to the left atrium. This is the left atrium we're in right now. Okay, and then the blood will pass down into the left ventricle. Okay, and then it passes out from the left ventricle, out the big vessel called the aorta, to all the body tissues. So that is a huge vessel. And this part of the heart, the left ventricle, is much thicker, has a much thicker muscular layer because it has so much a bigger a job to do. Okay, the right side isn't as thick because it only has to pump the blood to the lungs, which are right beside the heart. Okay, the left side is much thicker because it has to pump the blood to all the body tissues. All right, so that is the general flow of the blood. We're going to look at other color. Do we have pen? Maybe yellow. Okay, so in order for the blood to keep from passing back where it's not supposed to go, we have these valves. Okay, so there's a valve here and a valve here that prevent the backflow of blood from the ventricles back up into the atria. And there's a couple names we use for them. Because they're between the atrium and the ventricles on both sides, we can call them the right and left atrioventricular valves. Okay, so that would be the other name. It's asking you at the bottom, what's the other name for the cuspid valves? Or we can call them the cuspid valves. So on this side, on the right side, is the tricuspid valve. And tri, as you know, means 3. Cusp is point. Okay, so we have bicuspid teeth and cuspid teeth because of the number of points that are on our teeth. So we kind of relate it that way. This one has 3 points of attachment. And we're going to see that when we actually look at a heart model. And if you watch the animation. And also when we look at the pig hearts. Okay, so the tricuspid valve has 3 points of attachment where this valve attaches down into the walls of the ventricle. So on the left side is the bicuspid. Okay, so like the name suggests, instead of having 3 points of attachment, this one has 2 points of attachment. Okay, another name that you might hear the bicuspid called is the mitral valve. So that's naming those 2 valves. Now I get a different color. Okay, we have these valves. So these valves are named for the vessel, they can be named for their shape. Okay, so we can call them the right, this is right, and the left, semilunar valves, because if you look at the shape of them, the valves make half-moon shapes. Okay, the other way we name them is based on what vessel the blood goes into. So it's going into the pulmonary artery. This would be the right semilunar or the pulmonary valve. And this one would be the left semilunar, or it's going into the aorta, so it would also be known as the aortic valve. Okay, so that's the parts of the heart. The only other term on here that we didn't talk about was the septum. Okay, so this is the septum right along here. Well, colored in green, but that's the wall that divides the right and left halves of the ventricle. Okay, so the right and left ventricles are separated because of that septum. So it's really important we have that. So we have what's called pulmonary circulation. So pulmonary again means lungs. So pulmonary circulation means the blood is going between the heart and the lungs. So carries deoxygenated blood from. So this is pulmonary. Deoxygenated blood from the heart out to the lungs and back to the heart. Systemic circulation is basically between the heart and the body tissues, not including the lungs. Okay, so the blood would leave the heart, go out through the aorta, go to the body tissues, come back to the heart, and that would be systemic circulation. So it carries oxygenated blood to the tissues and deoxygenated blood back to the heart. The third type that you might hear of is coronary circulation or cardiac circulation, and that's basically the heart supplying itself, because the heart also has to provide itself with the oxygen and nutrients that it needs. Okay, there's a link on here to the animation of heart contraction and blood flow. Now, you should have been watching that anyway for the online mini lab, so I'm not going to show it to you right now, but you can watch it anytime on your own. How does the heart beat? So again, there's a great animation on here, and you're supposed to watch it for the online mini lab. But you can watch it anytime. I'm not going to show it right now, but I will talk about it a bit. Okay, so your heart is a muscle. It is made of what we call cardiac muscle, which is really special. It is a type of tissue that's myogenic, so it has both characteristics of muscles and of nerves. Okay, so basically, when the heart beats, the right atrium fills with blood. Okay, we have a node up here on the right atrium, which is called it's nicknamed your pacemaker. It's called the sinoatrial node. And when the right atrium fills, it is going to send a message to both of your atria. Okay, and both atria will then contract. It sends a second message down here to the second node, the atrioventricular node, which is found between the atrium and the ventricle. Okay, the atrioventricular node then sends a message down the septum, to both ventricles. Okay, and there's more detail in the online mini lab, but this is sufficient, okay, for what we need to know. So it sends a message down the septum to both ventricles and causes them to contract. Okay, so that is basically how your heart beats. Again, the animation is great to watch. I'm not going to show it right now, but feel free to watch it anytime. If you open this set of notes, or you can open the online mini lab, or you can find the link directly on the class notes page. One of your case studies asks you to describe and do a little sketch of an electrocardiogram. Okay, so an electrocardiograph is an instrument that measures electrical impulses of the heart. Okay, electro refers to electrical, cardio refers to heart. The reading that's produced is called an electrocardiogram, and the older machines would do it on paper, but the newer machines actually have a monitor. So the monitor that you'd often see when you go to visit someone in the hospital would have this, but it's a moving thing, and you can see the heart beating. Okay, basically, there's specific waves that they look for, and they have a certain pattern, and it tells the doctors certain information about how the heart is working. Okay, the P wave, it's PQRST. You should be able to draw and label one. You're asked to in your case study. You should be able to draw and label one, okay, and say what's happening at each. The P wave is marking when the atria are contracting. Okay, so the QRS, this big one, is when the ventricles contract, and the T is when the ventricles recover. They get back to normal so that they can contract again. Okay, so this little animation is another animation that you can watch to see it in action. Makes it a little more interesting and exciting, but I'll let you watch that on your own so that you don't have to listen to this for a long time. Okay, so that brings us to blood pressure, which will be in the next video.